Hey y'all, in this video I'm going to share 3 tips to a successful grant proposal from the perspective of a grant reviewer. This one is really good. Let's get into it. Hey y'all, it's Tiffany with Boss on a Budget. I help people start their nonprofits and raise money for their new nonprofits. And I share information all from the perspective of people starting from the ground up. There are not a lot of resources to help people who are just starting, and so that's why Boss on a Budget was created. And today I'm going to talk about how to win more grants, but talking from the perspective of the grant reviewer. One of the biggest mistakes that people make when they're writing grants is they don't understand the end user, the person on the other end of what they're writing. Because a lot of times when you're writing a grant proposal, you're probably under stress, you're probably working under a deadline, or for people who are new to this, don't know if you're really answering it the right way, so you're just writing stuff, and you're not necessarily thinking about the fact that somebody's going to actually print out what you sent or what you submitted and read it. So you're not thinking from that perspective, and so I want to give you 3 tips from that perspective to help level up the grant writing experience for you and also to help you to create better proposals. The first tip that I want to provide is I want you to think about the readability of your grant proposal. And as I was planning this video out, I wrote out readability without even looking to see if that's a real word. If it's not a real word, we're going to make it a word today, because you know what I mean. How well can someone read and interpret what you're saying in your grant proposal? We're going to look at this different ways. So one way you can look at this is if someone's actually reading a printout of what you're writing. And that's when you are actually submitting like a Word document, a document that's created in a word processing software, Google Docs or Word or whatever. I'm gonna take it back. I'm gonna show you how old I am. Word perfect. And you're actually writing a real proposal that you're submitting to a grant agency or a grant funder. So what I want you to understand is that people are going to actually read your proposal. And do you want them to read it or do you want them to skim it? 9 times out of 10, people, when they're reading and they're going quickly, they're going to skim it anyway. But do you want them to skim through a lot or skim through and really get to the main points that you need them to get? So from that perspective, if you know that somebody may be actually looking at a printout of what you are writing in your proposal, how does your proposal actually look? I want you to print it out and see for yourself. And I'm not talking about like fancy borders or, like fancy binding. I'm actually not talking about that. I'm talking about like, how are your paragraphs structured? How is the text broken up? Is there a lot of white space on your page? When you look at it, does it look like huge blocks of text where if you were to get lost in reading it, could you find your place and pick up where you left off? Are there a lot of headers to help organize what you're saying? Are there a lot of figures or pictures to help break up all of the text if there are things that you have to do or say to get your point across? Are you bulleting a lot of the different sections so it's easier to read? I just gave you a bunch of tips, y'all. I hope you were taking notes because that matters. When you are thinking about from the perspective of someone reading it, even if you're thinking about like people who are looking on the screen, because I know not everybody may print out things, even though I'm a little old school and I like to print out things. Even on the screen, if it's a PDF, how does it look? Can I easily scan? Can I easily find the sections that I'm looking for? And here's the thing, which relates to number 3, so I hope you keep watching, that if there are different sections that the funder asks you to have, can the people reading find those sections quickly? Are you titling sections or using headers that align with the sections that they said that they want to see in the proposal? It's really important because when someone's just using a checklist, and I'm giving away too much because that's what I'm going to talk about in part 3 or number 3, then can they easily find what they're looking for? The point of you writing the proposal and thinking about from the reviewer's perspective is, can the reviewer get everything they need easily from reading what you've submitted? Number 2, do not use jargony words or do not write in a way that's hard for people to understand what you're saying. So when I say jargon, I mean words that are used that in a professional space that are not typically used outside of that professional space, that people may not know what they are, right? You're not using layman's terms. You're not using terms that the general public would understand. And the mistake people make is that they assume that people reading the proposal know their industry, know the work, right? Understand what you're even talking about. And this is not done consciously sometimes. Sometimes when you work in an industry and you use certain words of vocabulary to express yourself, that's what you're used to. So it's just common to you. And when you work alongside a lot of people who are in the same industry as you, it's easy to talk using that language because you know the person's going to understand and you don't have to explain it. So you don't really have to explain yourself when you're working in your industry. But you have to understand that people reading your proposal may not be in your industry. And even if they're in your industry, you can't make assumptions about what they do and they don't know. So you have to be clear in explaining why you do certain things. You have to be clear in explaining how you do certain things. For example, if you do like mental health treatment and you're talking about different mental health modalities and different types of treatments, and you're using a lot of big words and you're, referencing different types of treatment or different experimental things that you're doing in the mental health space, child, even me talking about it, I'm just like, I don't know. So what I want you to understand is that the person on the other side, you can't assume anything about what they know. So where you're starting, when you're writing a proposal, you're making the assumption that they don't know anything. And so with that assumption, write that way. Write as if a 5th grader was reading it. And also write so that someone who does not know anything about your program can read the proposal and then say back to you what you do. That's an awesome test that you can try. I talked about that in another recent video that I recorded when it comes to grants. I'm linking that above. But can somebody dictate back to you what you do based on what you wrote? And that's an indicator that either your program isn't clear, like how you've structured or how you've laid out what your program is, like you haven't done that clearly, or it could be that you're not a clear writer. Right? It may be an indicator that you need to go back and work on your writing skills. But all that to say, again, make sure you're keeping the reviewer in mind and don't make any assumptions about what they know and what they don't know. And then finally, make sure that what you're writing aligns with what the funder is asking for and is aligned with the funder's interest. So I'm going to talk about this 2 different ways, and y'all, I'm giving you cheat codes in this video. Again, I hope you are taking notes, because this is the kind of stuff that you usually get in classes when it comes to grant writing. So the first things first, this is particularly for government proposals, government requests for proposals. They'll have like a rubric or they'll have like a scoring sheet, and they'll say, for this section, we're going to give you 10 points. For this section, we're going to give you 12 points. And they'll clearly write out what they're expecting to see in a proposal. When I first started writing, and I started writing with federal government grants first, that threw me off because I was like, you already know what you want me to write, but you're asking me to write it back to you. That's how it's structured sometimes with their requests for proposals. They'll put a literature review in the request for proposals, and they'll say, this is why we're doing this. And then they'll have a section to say, now we want you to write why you're doing this program. And it threw me off because I'm like, well, you just explained it. So why do I have to explain it back to you? And I would feel like, well, y'all know this. Why am I writing this out? But I didn't understand back then, first of all, that somebody writing an RFP is probably not going to be the same person reviewing the proposal. And also, all that matters is what's in front of them right then and there. So they're not looking at the request for proposals to say, oh yes, that's right, that's why we do this work. No, they're looking at your proposal. They're looking at only what you submitted. And that's the only thing that you have to get your point across at that point in time when they're reviewing the proposal. So you need to make sure that everything is there that aligns with what they asked for. So if a funder tells you, we're looking for programs that focus on this, we want you to talk about this in the proposal, we want you to have this frame when you're writing out your proposals. If a funder specifically takes the time to tell you that, then you need to do it. That's not something that you just be like, oh, it was just a suggestion. No, if they put that in the request for proposals, that means they want to see it. They want to see it reflected in what you send back to them. So if you're doing a government grant, especially, and there's a scoring rubric or there's points that they mention, then take that piece of paper and go back and score yourself when you're writing your proposal to make sure you hit every single thing before you submit that proposal to that funding agency. So when a funder tells you specifically what they're looking for, or when a funder gives you signals about their values and what's important to them, then you need to take note of those signals. You need to pay attention to those signals so that all of that is reflected in your grant proposal. And this is what I talk about when I teach grant writing. If you need help with understanding grant writing and just knowing the process when it comes to finding grants, to how to write it, to how to organize your grant writing process, I'm linking my grants masterclass below. But when I teach about grant writing, I teach about how to be funder focused, not grant focused. So many times people go after the grants and they see a grant opportunity and they just go from grant to grant to grant. But you need to be focused on the funder. You need to be looking at the funder. You need to understand what they care about, how they talk, so that you can be aligned with them in order to increase your likelihood to be funded by them. I hope this information was helpful. I want all of you to succeed. I wish you the best on your grant writing journey. If you need help with your nonprofit, make sure you visit me at bossonabudget.com. And also, if you need help or clarity or assistance trying to figure out your next steps, you can also book a consultation with me. And that information you can find below in the description box. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.